welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Dalton Conley, Senior Vice Provost and Dean of Social Sciences at NYU, right? I just got through asking if you're a social scientist, which you told me was pretty broad. But what you do is talk about attitudes about spending money. Correct? One of the things you do, and you research things. So I want to start out by saying this to you. May I call you Dalton?
Yes, please.
And I saw you got lots of awards, so but we're on first name basis here. Yeah. It wasn't all that long ago before, when people, if they were able to hire private time, they jetted to the Caribbean, they talked about it. If you bought something at Chanel, you had that Chanel shopping bag in your hand, and you walked down the street carrying it, and it was a piece of distinction. Now, if you buy something in Chanel, you want in a plain brown paper bag.
Right.
What happened?
Well, the economy tanked. That's what happened. So, in times that are really flush and economic growth is huge, conspicuous consumption, which is the term, becomes really trendy. Now, you want to hide things if you're actually doing quite well, to be a little empathetic or sympathetic to the people around you. What's really amazing, however, though, is that luxury spending in recent months has actually recovered. So people are spending the money, they're just doing the brown paper bag, like you said.
Yeah, and in fact, major financial firms have told their employees, don't fly first class, sit in the tourist section, don't shop at Hermes. I mean, they're told not to do this, but people have them. You still go into a top-notch restaurant in any major city, not just New York, Chicago, Boston, California. I just came back from a trip to California not long ago. And you have to call 2 weeks in advance to get a reservation.
Well, what I think this is
There's a real disconnect, Dalton.
There is a disconnect.
And this is what you do for a living. Explain that disconnect.
Okay, I'll tell you the disconnect. The disconnect is because not only we experienced a Great Recession, we have experienced a recession that did not reduce inequality, if anything, increase inequality. If you go back to 1928 and 2007 were the times when inequality in the United States was its highest points in the century. And of course, what happened, it's like it gets too heavy, top-heavy, and it topples over. But in the Great Depression, we saw an incredible reduction of inequality. I mean, the amount of income that was going to the top 1% was radically reduced, and basically we all became more equal, worse off, but more equal. What's different this time is that hasn't happened. Wall Street is back in business in a big way.
In a big way.
But the average American is actually spending less, saving more, which is a good thing. And there's this huge disparity that is much more evident now. It was there in the boom time, but it's much more evident now that some people are really hurting and others aren't.
I know. Something like 1 out of 6 Americans is having problems with unemployed or part-time, and then this is it's almost like there's no middle class anymore. It's here. It's really the haves and the have-nots.
Two societies, right?
Yeah. So tell me something. This is what it is. Do you, in your position, have solutions for this? What do you actually do once you spell out that this is what's going on?
Diagnose this?
Yeah. Are you like a doctor? Do you have a prescription?
Unfortunately, no one's giving me a prescription pad, and I think unlike medicine, there's no easy answers. I mean, the debate over the Bush tax cut extension now is playing out this very issue.
Well, yeah, and President Obama says now that the Republicans have won a House. Absolutely, I will talk about. They don't call it tax cuts. There's this whole nomenclature now.
Tax
reductions or tax release. Mm-hmm. It's a nicer word than cuts. Yeah, I'll talk about it. But for whether you're a caring American or you don't say it has to do with being liberal or conservative, you can't ignore the fact that this is a societal problem in this country right now.
What's amazing to me is the fact that it's not seen as a problem. There's this incredible inequality, and there is, of course, the populist rage at Wall Street and the bailout, but it's directed against the government, not against Goldman Sachs, for example, directly. Or most people probably don't even know what Goldman Sachs is in the heartland of America. They want their taxes cut. And that's it. and they don't realize that in the overall picture, that's actually going to exacerbate the problem the way they're doing it, because the lion's share of the savings is going to go to the people at the very, very, very top.
Yeah. So tell me something. What should concerned? I mean, what should concerned Americans do?
We're really in a tough spot. I think that what's amazing to me is that in the boom time in 2005-06, we had a negative savings rate. People were so confident that their housing values were like piggy banks they could just draw out of, that they actually drew down on their equity and net. The only other time that we've had a negative savings rate, we've always been lousy savers compared to, say, the Japanese or the Germans, but the only other time in the 20th century that we had a negative savings rate was during the Great Depression. Then it makes sense. If you can't feed your family, you're going to dip into your assets and liquidate and try to.
Absolutely.
But in a boom time, we have a negative savings rate. Something is really off kilter. So on the one hand, I think most Americans are doing the right thing now. They're paying down their debt. They're saving. Well, finally, our savings rate is creeping upwards, which is good for the long term.
Even the rich, even those folks that, the haves, we'll call them the haves, even the rich don't feel as rich anymore.
Well,
I mean, for one thing, real estate values are down. The market is back, but it's not back to where it was. It's still, if you go by percentage, it's still down probably 30% from where it was.
Well, you know what? I think that many people in the top half of the distribution of income, where all the inequality really is. The bottom half is packed pretty tightly, but the top half is really wide, broad. They always feel poor. The reason, even times are good, they feel poor because relative to the person just above them, who's so far above them, they're poor, and who's accelerating even at a faster rate than them.
And that's always been kind of a story here in America, part of the American dream. Keeping up with the Jones, it's always been a piece of the story.
Keeping up with the Gateses these days.
Yeah, that's always been part of the story. In your work, tell me again. What do you study attitudes toward money?
No, that's not my main thing.
That's a piece of your main
is behavior. About when do people save? When do they not save? How do they pass wealth on to their kids or not? What do they spend their money on, etc.
So let me ask you something. What do they spend their money on? Let's start from there. This comes up over and over again. Does money bring happiness, Dalton?
You know what? I avoid that question. Happiness is such a subjective indicator that I try to stick with objective things that you can really weigh or measure or somehow. Look, the Danish are according to all these happiness surveys, the Danish are the happiest folks in the entire world, the happiest country. However, the Danish, like the Swedish and the Norwegians and the Finnish, have one of the highest suicide rates in the world. So how can you be the happiest country and kill yourselves at a very high rate? So that alone makes me dismiss, skeptical of happiness. And Great Britain and some other, Nepal and other countries now are trying to create a gross happiness index instead of a GHP.
Gross happiness.
Product,
that's something. That'll give you something. That'll give you something to study for a while. Yeah. Well, I've done some shows on happiness, and more articles that we read and talk to, people say that there's a swing away from valuing commodities, items, and more a appreciation of experiences, family experiences. Have you found that people are spending their money more on things that bring happy memories or happy experiences?
Well, what we know about the relationship between money and happiness, even though I'm very skeptical,
I know, I pushed you into it.
Is that if you're very poor, and when I say very poor, I mean sub-Saharan Africa poverty, where you don't have the basic necessities of life. There is an incredible relationship between money and happiness. I mean, being able to get medicine, being able to feed your family, of course that relieves of stress and makes you healthier and happier. Once you get past a certain basic level of living with dignity, more money doesn't make you more happy. We know that.
Where is enough?
There is no, the answer is it's never enough. There's a lot of media hype right now about that we're turning back to more non-monetary values and so forth. It's hard to know. That's the standard story during a recession. You could recycle the ones from '82, I'm sure, look in the New York Times and see the same stories, or going back to each recession. So I don't know if there's a long-term value. I know that deep somewhere in our cultural DNA, we do have values that we've kind of forgotten about thrift and savings, going back to Benjamin Franklin, and self-reliance and
Yes.
and less materialistic.
Yes.
Whether those have been eclipsed for a long time now, and whether they emerge from the shadows now in a long-term way, it remains to be seen.
Well, speaking of that, you're probably not going to, I don't think you want to answer this question, but speaking about self-reliance and independent responsibility, how much of what we're going through, even in terms of housing values and subprime, how much of that is greed on the part of the institutions and a complete lack of any self-reliance on the part of the person that signed up for these faulty mortgages? Where's the line?
Institutions don't have emotions, they don't have greed, they don't have desires. You know, corporations and financial industry corporations as well try to maximize profits. That's what they're doing.
That's what they're supposed to do.
And what's the problem is that the way we didn't have the right set of incentives and strictures in place in the legal system and in the financial regulation system to allow, for example, Goldman Sachs to, on the one hand, arrange deals. I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, right.
At the same time, actually be a party to those deals. So it's basically legalized insider trading, you know, or
conflict of interest.
Yeah, conflict of interest. I mean, there's plenty of examples of the poor regulations that were in place. And you know what? As fast as we think of new regulations,
right.
the innovators will think of a way to hack them.
Also, I mean, most consumers realize if you're talking to somebody and getting some kind of advice, whether it's fiduciary advice, financial advice, or just which car to buy or what TV to buy or anything, what house to buy, the person you're talking to either is talking about his pocket and your pocket. And after all, when a person's talking about his pocket and your pocket, what pocket's going to come first? You're the scientist in the scheme.
Oh, those are called principal agent problems, and they're rife. Whether that's the manager and the shareholders, the person selling your apartment for you or your house for you, the real estate agent, and you. We try to minimize those in economics, but they're an inevitable part of economic life, and you just have to be. But people have to be aware of them.
People have to be educated.
Right.
So, we have about a minute left. What you do is fascinating. And in close, what conclusions do you come to about some of this stuff?
Oh, well, Harry Truman used to say, give me a one-armed economist, because they would always say on the one hand this and on the other hand that.
Right.
I think we social science, we have some conclusion, we know a few things, but ultimately, in the academic research literature, there's always just more questions that are
The more you know, the more you know, the more good. Well, let me finish with the last question. That's really, when is this going to be over?
The recession?
On the one hand, maybe next year, and then the other one, you're not going to
go on the record for that.
I guess we have to get Ben Bernanke to go on the record for that one. So so tell me something. Should we use banks or mattresses these days? It's about the same.
Yeah, if we hit deflation, which some people think, your mattress will be pretty good too.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you. I wanted you to come back, and I want to get somebody to explain to me what it means to have a negative interest rate.
Yeah.
I can't figure out how you can be below zero.
Because if you're anticipating deflation.
That's below. Anyway, thanks very much for being on the show. You were interesting, and I must say, with a nice smile too.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you for watching Getting Your Money's Worth. I'm Judith West, and our guest was Dalton Conley, Senior Vice Provost, I want to get it right, and Dean of Social Sciences at NYU. Thanks for watching.